Hello everyone. You ever see something and go like, that's a bold thing to claim? Well, I was going out to buy some yarn for a project I was commissioned to do, and because I went to the craft store, obviously I came back with more than what I intended to buy. And I saw something in the clearance section that seemed impressive, and it was like, I gotta try this. Although I ended up buying not the clearance section one, but the one of the full price ones, or actually they were on sale, but one of the other ones, because the clearance skein was all white and that wasn't exactly my that didn't feel as much like me as some of the other skeins. But here it is. Look at how big this monster is. It is bigger than my head. But this is from Lion Brand, not a sponsor. But they make a claim: make an Afghan with just one cake. I have made Afghans with this size yarn before. It depends on how big the Afghan is going to be. So if it takes just one cake to make an Afghan, I mean, if I was making a baby blanket, it'd be like, hell yeah, it'd be more than big enough. But I don't think there's enough in here to make like a full bed covering size in here. And not that there isn't a lot of yarn in here. On the back here, it says it's 2.2 pounds or 1 kilogram, which is more than double of the biggest skein of yarn I bought previously. But it does make me wonder whether this claim is actually true, whether I can just use only one to make an Afghan, or if I was just a sucker and bought some really pretty yarn, which honestly, if there are things that I could be a sucker about, I'm okay with it. I would, if being a sucker meant I ended up with this really pretty yarn, I'd do it over and over again. So inside there says it's a beginner pattern. I haven't yet looked. Let's see. It's a knit pattern. I was thinking, like, I don't really have knitting needles big enough for this yarn. Well, I do have knitting needles big enough. I don't have knitting needles long enough for an Afghan, so I was thinking of crocheting. So, you loosely cast on 74 stitches and you knit 4 rows. And then knit 3, purl 3. Oh, knit 3, purl the last 3 stitches, knit the last 3 stitches. Ah! I see what they're doing here. So they want like a border of 3 stitches around the square inside, which is just going to be a straight stockinette stitch. Which, quite honestly, with this like variegated yarn, I don't want to do any like super complicated patterns, because the striping of the yarn will be enough of a pattern itself and the stitches would get lost. But even though it means it's going to be bursting on the knitting needles, I think I will still knit this. I'm not going to bother rolling this, even though I probably should, because there's a lot. I know from experience that if I roll it into a ball like for a pound, I'd have to cut it into like at least twice to get 3 or 4 different balls, so the balls were more manageable. And I feel like if I really want to test the claim there's enough, I shouldn't put any cuts into it that aren't necessary. If that makes sense. Seven stitches is about 4 inches. How big's the needle? Be sure to check your gauge. Size 15, I got that. All right. So at this point, I'm going to get started on knitting this, and we'll see how it goes. All right. So as you can see, I have started the blanket, and it is just barely being contained on the needles. It said to start it loose, but I think I started a little bit tighter, but as you can see, this is over 2 needles and it's barely fitting, so it just hardly even fits on the 1 needle. But I've also barely made a dent in the cake so far, so I'm torn between this not being big enough versus not having enough to do what I want to do. Anyway, after I start this 5th row, I'm going to do a bit of a different row pattern than the previous 5 rows because this is just the border, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay, so another update on making it. It's starting to look marginally smaller after just, I want to say about a dozen rows or so. I didn't realize until after I started that I could have easily used the center pole, which is what I probably would have preferred to use, but in all honesty, I know using the center pole would cause the middle to collapse faster, so it would actually stay more sturdy this way. And it's coming along relatively nicely. I mean, it's bunched up way too tightly on the needles for me to even know what size this is. And you can see from the way how quickly the color is changing that if I had done any more complicated design, it would have gotten lost. So I'm really thankful actually that I didn't choose to go for a more complicated pattern. I did go a little bit too tight on the cast on edge because if you look here, it's not going to lie flat. But I am feeling a little bit too frustrated from this part for me to even consider taking it out and doing it again. Anyway, that's how that's going so far. And since it's just the 2 rows that I'm repeating, it's pretty easy to know where I am in the pattern. So now it's just going to be straight or close to straight stockinette stitch until I reach the point where I have to put the border back on again. Look at how small it's gotten. Like, here's my hand bite for reference. It is definitely much smaller than it used to be. It's done. And now we're going to talk about it. So when I finished the blanket, I didn't bother going to find the thing again. I just estimated it. And it turns out I remembered it wrong. It said repeat rows 1 through 12 until a piece measures about 51 inches. I thought it said 55. And then I gave up when it was like around 53 inches. So I actually thought I was underachieving, but I was overachieving. Woo! But yeah, I can tell you that if you buy Cover Story and follow the instructions to make an Afghan, oh, some yarn just fell down. You will have enough yarn to make the Afghan. It will be enough. I mean, if I were to do it differently, I would do a different cast-on method. I would also use a set of circular needles instead of straight needles, because like I was trying to overstuff too many stitches on the needles. And that, like, it doesn't sound like it, but when you overstuff stitches on the needles, it does make it harder to knit because you're worried about losing the stitches. But yeah, I mean, this is the amount of yarn I had left over. Which, considering how much I had, it's pretty good. Pretty good. I don't know what I'm going to do with this now. I'll find like some little thing for it later, but yeah, it was like it was worth it. Definitely. Especially like since with this type of yarn, ending up with the blanket, it's going to be a warm blanket. And it's machine washable too. Now, I don't have the blanket anymore because Christmas has passed and I gave it to my godmother, since giving blankets is a knitter's version of giving a hug that you can give them when you're not there, and my godmother deserves all the hugs. Also, she hates being cold, so she loved it. And yeah, I was like doubtful at the beginning that this would be enough, and turns out it was. Good marketing there, Lion Brand. Anyway, that was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.